One missing semicolon can destroy a billion-dollar empire in a heartbeat. That is exactly what happened to Arthur Caldwell, the tech world's untouchable king, on the most important night of his life. The screens went black, the investors went silent, and his entire legacy hung by a thread. But help didn't come from his Ivy League engineers or his high-priced consultants. It came from the shadows, from someone nobody even looked at, a girl holding a tray of champagne who knew more about code than the CEO himself. But who was she really? And why was a genius like her wiping tables? The truth would shatter everything. The Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom smelled of expensive cologne, desperation, and the faint, ozone scent of overheating servers. This was the night that was supposed to change history. 500 of the world's wealthiest investors, tech moguls, and government officials sat in velvet chairs, their eyes fixed on the massive 8K screen dominating the stage. Arthur Caldwell stood in the spotlight, a man who usually commanded rooms with a whisper. Tonight, however, sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening under the harsh stage lights. He was 42, handsome in a jagged, intense way, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was the CEO of Apex Logic, and he was about to launch the Sentinel, a quantum computing interface designed to revolutionize global cybersecurity. "The future isn't coming," Arthur said, his voice amplified through the state-of-the-art sound system. "The future is here. With Sentinel, data breaches are a relic of the past. Total security, zero latency, flawless execution." In the shadows of the room, far away from the spotlight, Morgan Bennett adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder. Her uniform was a stiff, uncomfortable black vest and trousers that were slightly too short. She was 24, with messy brown hair tied back in a severe bun mandated by the hotel management. To the people in this room, she was furniture. She was a robot, designed to refill empty flutes of Dom Perignon and disappear. "Table 4 needs water, Morgan." "Move it," hissed Gavin, the floor manager. Gavin was a short man with a Napoleon complex and breath that smelled perpetually of onions. "And stop staring at the screen. You're paid to serve, not to dream." "Yes, Gavin," Morgan whispered, lowering her eyes. She moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility. But as she poured sparkling water for a heavy-set man smoking a cigar, her eyes flicked back to the stage. Arthur Caldwell was gesturing grandly to the screen. "Initiate Phase 1, Arthur commanded. The massive screen shifted. The Apex Logic logo dissolved into a stream of complex data visualizations. The audience gasped in appreciation. It was beautiful. And then it froze. At first, people thought it was part of the show, a dramatic pause. Arthur kept his smile fixed, though a small tick jumped in his jaw. He tapped the remote clicker in his hand. Nothing happened. "As you can see," Arthur said, his voice tight, "the processing power is immense." Behind him, the beautiful blue visualization stuttered, the colors inverted. A jagged line of red code tore across the screen like a wound. Then, the audio system let out a deafening screech that had billionaires clutching their ears. The screen went black. A collective murmur rippled through the ballroom. It sounded like the buzzing of angry hornets. "Just a momentary glitch," Arthur said, laughing nervously. "Live demos, right?" He glared toward the wings of the stage where his chief technical officer, Brian, was frantically typing on a terminal, but the screen didn't recover. Instead, a terminal window popped up, magnified to 50 feet tall. White text began to scroll rapidly against a black background. It wasn't the Sentinel interface. It was a kernel panic, a catastrophic system failure. "Error. Memory allocation. Fail at 0004F3A. Critical. Deadlock detected. System halt. Morgan froze mid-paw. She knew that error. She didn't just know it, she felt it in her teeth. It wasn't a hardware failure. It was a race condition in the boot sequence. The primary thread was waiting for a resource that the secondary thread had locked. It was a rookie mistake, buried deep in the architecture. On stage, Arthur's composure shattered. "Brian, cut the feed, reset the system." Brian, a man who earned 7 figures a year, looked like he was about to vomit. "I can't, sir. It's locked out. The admin privileges are frozen. It's looping." The investors began to stand up. The murmurs turned into shouts. "Is this a joke, Caldwell? The stock is dropping already. My firm put 200 million into this." Arthur looked out at the sea of angry faces. His life's work was dissolving in real time. He felt a cold panic grip his chest, tightening like a vice. If this failed, Apex Logic was dead. He was dead. "Reboot it manually," Arthur screamed, abandoning the microphone, shouting directly at his team. "We tried," Brian yelled back, panic making his voice crack. "The terminal isn't accepting inputs. It's a brick, Arthur. The whole system is bricked." Gavin, the floor manager, was frantically waving at the waitstaff. "Clear the tables, get the glasses. Look busy, for God's sake. Don't just stand there watching the train wreck." Morgan didn't move. She stared at the giant screen. The lines of code were scrolling slower now, repeating the same deadlock error. Wait, she thought. Look at the memory address. It wasn't just a deadlock. It was a syntax error in the override command. Someone had missed a closing bracket in the emergency shell script. It was so simple, so stupid, that a team of high-level engineers overthinking the problem would never look for it. They were looking for complex, quantum destabilization. They weren't looking for a missing bracket. She gripped her tray. "Don't do it, Morgan. You're a waitress. You need this job. You have rent to pay. You have a past to hide." "Morgan!" Gavin grabbed her arm, his fingernails digging in. "I told you to move!" The tray slipped from her hand. Crash. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the chaotic noise of the room. A silence fell near table 4. Gavin's face turned purple. "You clumsy idiot," Gavin hissed. "Get out! You're fired! Get out now!" But Morgan wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the stage. Arthur Caldwell had slumped against the podium, looking defeated. Brian had his head in his hands. Morgan looked at the laptop sitting unattended on a side table near the stage, the auxiliary debugging console. It was connected. Nobody was touching it, because everyone was crowded around the main server rack. "I said get out!" Gavin shoved her. That shove did it. The adrenaline spiked. Morgan dropped her napkin. She didn't turn toward the exit. She turned toward the stage. "Hey!" Gavin shouted. "Where are you going?" Morgan started running. "Security!" Arthur shouted into the microphone, which was unfortunately still working. "Get someone down here to fix this!" He didn't see the waitress until she was already on the stairs. She moved with a speed that was entirely at odds with the formal atmosphere. She vaulted up the 3 steps to the stage, her black vest flying open. "Get her off the stage!" Arthur roared, seeing a member of the catering staff rushing toward the delicate equipment. "What the hell is going on?" 2 large security guards in suits started moving from the sides, but the stage was cluttered with wires and panicked engineers. They were slow. Morgan was fast. She reached the auxiliary laptop. "Don't touch that!" Brian screamed, looking up from the main server. "You'll wipe the backup." Morgan ignored him. She ignored the blinding stage lights. She ignored the 500 rich people staring at her in confusion. She ignored Arthur Caldwell, who was now storming toward her with murder in his eyes. Her fingers hit the keys. Clack, 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 clack. The mechanical keyboard felt heavy, satisfying. The terminal window on the laptop was mirrored on the giant screen behind her. The audience watched, stunned, as a new command line appeared at the bottom of the scrolling error text. Sudo kill 9.1 v boot config sentinel core.sys. She's hacking it, someone in the front row shouted. Arthur grabbed her shoulder. Get away from there! Morgan spun around, her eyes blazing. For the first time, Arthur saw her. Really saw her. She had eyes the color of steel, and they were filled with an intensity that stopped him cold. Do you want to save your company, or do you want to yell at me? She snapped. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Arthur blinked, stunned by her audacity. In that split second of hesitation, Morgan turned back to the keyboard. Line 402, she muttered to herself, her fingers flying. Missing bracket, recursive loop, bypass the GUI. She typed furiously. On the giant screen, the audience saw the code open up. They saw her delete a block of complex text and replace it with 3 simple lines. If, system lock, guest return override. Else, execute, boot. She's rewriting the kernel, Brian gasped, stepping up behind Arthur. She's bypassing the safety protocols. Stop her, Arthur ordered, snapping out of his daze. She'll fry the processor. The security guard reached her. A heavy hand clamped onto Morgan's wrist, yanking her hand away from the enter key. Party's over, miss, the guard grunted. No, Morgan shouted. It's already queued. If you don't execute now, the heatsink fails. The giant screen turned red. A warning siren began to wail. Critical temperature. Shutdown imminent. Arthur looked at the screen. He looked at his useless team of engineers. He looked at the waitress, held in the grip of his security guard. Let her go, Arthur whispered. The guard hesitated. Sir? I said let her go, Arthur screamed. The guard released her. Morgan didn't hesitate. She didn't rub her wrist. She slammed her finger down on the enter key. Command executed. The room went silent. The red screen flickered. It went black. 1 second passed. 2 seconds. You killed it, Gavin, the manager, shouted from the floor. She destroyed it! I told you she was incompetent! Then a low hum vibrated through the floorboards. The giant screen lit up, not with an error code, but with a pure, spinning golden circle. The Apex Logic logo appeared, sharper and brighter than before. System restored. Sentinel online. Integrity, 100%. The dashboard flooded the screen, live data streaming in perfect synchronization. The deadlock was gone. The system was live. Morgan exhaled, her shoulders slumping. She stepped back from the laptop, suddenly realizing where she was. She was center stage. 500 people were staring at her. Arthur Caldwell was staring at her, as if she were an alien species. Slowly, a single person in the back began to clap. Then another. Then the room erupted. The investors, relieved that their money wasn't gone, roared with applause. It was a standing ovation. But Morgan didn't smile. She looked terrified. Arthur stepped toward her, his expression unreadable. He looked at her cheap uniform, her name tag, which read Morgan, and then back to the code she had just written. Code that his top engineers couldn't figure out. Who are you? Arthur asked, his voice low, only for her to hear. Morgan looked at the exit. Nobody. I'm just the help. Nobody writes a kernel bypass in 10 seconds, Morgan, Arthur said, stepping closer, invading her space. Who are you working for? Tech Global? Omnicorp? I'm not a corporate spy, she said, backing away. I saw the error. You saw a syntax error in compiled hexadecimal code? Arthur looked incredulous. That's impossible. I have to go, Morgan said. She turned and ran down the stairs. Wait, Arthur shouted. This time nobody stopped her. The crowd parted for her, looking at her with awe and confusion. She ran past Gavin, who stood with his mouth open and pushed through the double doors into the kitchen. Arthur stood on the stage, the applause washing over him, but he felt a different kind of panic now. He turned to Brian. "Get the logs," Arthur commanded, his eyes still fixed on the swinging kitchen doors. "Sir?" "Save every keystroke she just typed," Arthur said, his voice cold and sharp. "And get security to bring her to my office. Do not let her leave this building." "Arthur?" Brian stammered. "She fixed it. We should be thanking her." "She didn't just fix it, Brian," Arthur said, pointing at the screen. "Look at the timestamp." Brian looked. "What about it?" "She started typing the bypass command before the error code fully rendered on the screen," Arthur said darkly. "She knew it was going to crash before we did." Arthur buttoned his jacket. "Find her. Now." The kitchen was a chaotic maze of stainless steel and shouting chefs. Morgan didn't stop. She stripped off her vest as she ran, throwing it into a dirty linen bin. She needed to get to her locker, get her coat, and get out the back exit before anyone asked questions. She had broken her own rule. Never show them what you can do. She reached the staff locker room, her hands shaking as she dialed the combination on her padlock. 32 Tortas at 15:08. It clicked open. She grabbed her worn denim jacket and her backpack. "Going somewhere?" Morgan froze. Standing in the doorway of the locker room wasn't Gavin. It was the head of security for Apex Logic, a man built like a tank with a scar running through his eyebrow. Behind him stood two other men. "My shift is over," Morgan said, trying to keep her voice steady. She clutched her backpack to her chest. "Mr. Caldwell wants a word," the man said. "I'm fired," Morgan said. "Gavin fired me. I don't work here anymore." "Mr. Caldwell doesn't care about your employment status with the hotel," the man said, stepping forward. "He cares about the intellectual property you just accessed." "I saved his presentation," Morgan snapped. "Or you sabotaged it so you could play the hero," the man countered. "Come with us. Please don't make it a scene." Morgan calculated the distance to the fire exit. 12 feet, but the men were blocking the path. She had no choice. "Fine," she said. They escorted her not to the lobby, but up the service elevator to the penthouse suite. The ride was silent. Morgan's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about the file hidden on the USB drive in her shoe. If they searched her, if they found out who she really was, fixing a computer would be the least of her problems. The elevator doors opened directly into a suite that was larger than Morgan's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Arthur Caldwell was standing by the window, holding a glass of scotch. He didn't turn around when they entered. "Leave us," Arthur said. The security guards hesitated. "Sir, she's a potential threat." "She's a waitress who weighs 110 pounds, Arthur said dryly. "If she attacks me, I'll take my chances. Get out." The guards left, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Arthur turned around. He looked tired. The arrogance from the stage was gone, replaced by a sharp, predatory curiosity. He took a sip of his drink and gestured to a leather armchair. "Sit." "I'd rather stand," Morgan said. "Suit yourself." Arthur walked over to a desk and picked up a tablet. Morgan Bennett, age 24, high school diploma from a public school in Ohio, no college record, employment history, diner waitress, gas station attendant, and for the last 3 months, banquet server at the Grand Meridian. He looked up at her. Very boring, very consistent. "Is there a crime in being boring?" Morgan asked. "No," Arthur said, "but there is a crime in fraud. Because this person," he tapped the tablet, "this person doesn't know what a kernel panic is. This person doesn't know Unix command lines. And this person certainly doesn't type 80 words per minute on a Dvorak keyboard layout which is what my engineering laptop uses. He tossed the tablet onto the sofa. Who are you really? I read a lot, Morgan said. I'm self-taught. Arthur laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Self-taught? You utilized a patch for a memory leak that was documented in a white paper that hasn't even been published yet. That code you wrote, it was elegant. It was too good. He walked closer to her. I have enemies, Morgan. Big ones. Did Cipher Systems send you? Did they plant the bug so you could swoop in and gain my trust? No, Morgan cried, offended. I saw your engineer struggling. He was looking at the application layer. The problem was in the kernel. I couldn't watch it fail. I like the Sentinel system. I've been following its development. You follow my company? I follow the tech, she corrected. The architecture is brilliant, but your implementation is sloppy. Arthur's eyes widened. Sloppy? Yes. You have 20 engineers writing code that doesn't talk to each other. That deadlock happened because your security team and your interface team are using different protocol standards. It's a mess. Arthur stared at her. For a moment, he forgot she was a waitress. He felt like he was back in the boardroom with his mentor. You're right, he admitted softly. It is a mess. He walked back to the window. I can't let you go, Morgan. You can't keep me here. That's kidnapping. I don't mean physically, Arthur said. I mean I can't let that brain walk out the door to pour coffee for truck drivers. I want to hire you. Morgan blinked. What? Junior analyst. No, scratch that. Lead debugger. Triple your current salary. No, 10 times your current salary. Benefits, stock options. You start tomorrow. Morgan's heart leapt. It was the dream. It was everything she had ever wanted. To work in a real lab, on real systems, to stop hiding. But she couldn't. I can't, she whispered. Arthur turned, confused. Excuse me? I just offered you a golden ticket. Why? Because, Morgan said, gripping her backpack strap. If you run a background check on me, a real one, you won't hire me. You'll call the FBI. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Why would I call the FBI? Morgan took a deep breath. She had to give him something, or he wouldn't stop digging. Because my name isn't really Morgan Bennett, she said. Arthur set his glass down. Go on. 5 years ago, she said, her voice trembling. There was a hacker group called The Void. They took down the Eastern Seaboard power grid for 4 hours. Arthur's face went pale. I remember. They never caught the leader. They called him the Architect. Morgan looked Arthur dead in the eye. I'm not him, she said. I'm the Architect. The silence in the room was deafening. Arthur stared at the girl in the cheap denim jacket. The most wanted cyber criminal in America was standing in his hotel suite. You, Arthur breathed. You were 19. I was bored, she said. I didn't mean to crash the grid. It was an accident, just like your deadlock tonight. Arthur ran a hand through his hair. This changed everything. If he hired her, he was harboring a fugitive. If he turned her in, he lost the only person who understood his system better than he did. Suddenly, a loud banging on the hotel suite door shattered the tension. Police, open up! Morgan's eyes went wide with panic. She looked at Arthur. You called them? No, Arthur said, looking genuinely confused. I didn't. The door burst open. But it wasn't the police. It was a woman in a sharp, white suit, flanked by 2 lawyers. It was Vivian Cross, Arthur's biggest investor, and the fiercest woman on Wall Street. And she looked furious. Arthur, Vivian shouted, ignoring Morgan. The board is convening an emergency meeting. Tonight! Vivian, now is not the time, Arthur said, stepping in front of Morgan to shield her. The time is exactly now, Vivian spat. The stock dropped 12% during that crash. We know it wasn't a glitch. We know it was sabotage. And we know who did it." Vivian pointed a manicured finger directly at Morgan. "She did it," Vivian accused. "We have footage of her tampering with the server rack 2 hours before the show." Morgan gasped. "That's a lie. I was setting tables." "Save it," Vivian said coldly. "Arthur, this girl is a plant. She crashed your system so she could fix it and infiltrate your team. She's working for Orbital Tech." Arthur looked at Morgan. He looked at Vivian. "Is that true?" Arthur asked Morgan. "Are you working for Orbital?" "No!" Morgan shouted. "I told you who I am." "She's lying," Vivian said. "Security. Take her into custody. The real police are on their way." Arthur looked at Morgan. He saw the fear in her eyes. It looked genuine. But Vivian was powerful, and the evidence sounded damning. "Wait," Arthur said. He looked at Morgan. "Prove it," he said. "What?" Morgan asked. "Prove you aren't a corporate spy," Arthur said. "Sit at that desk. Hack Orbital Tech. Right now. If you're really the architect, you can breach their firewall in 5 minutes. If you can't, then Vivian is right, and you're going to prison." Morgan looked at the computer, then at Arthur. "If I do that," she said, "I'm committing a felony in front of witnesses." "You're already a fugitive," Arthur said, a small, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "What have you got to lose?" Morgan threw her backpack on the floor and sat at the desk. "Start the clock," she said. The air in the penthouse suite was so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Morgan sat at the mahogany desk, the leather chair swallowing her small frame. Her hands hovered over the backlit keyboard of Arthur's personal terminal. 5 minutes, Arthur said, checking his watch. "Orbital Tech has military-grade encryption. If you're a fraud, you won't even get past the handshake protocol." Vivian Cross stood by the door, her arms crossed, a smug expression plastered on her face. "This is ridiculous, Arthur. You're letting a catering girl access your private network to commit a cybercrime. The board will have your head for this." "Quiet," Arthur commanded, his eyes fixed on Morgan. Morgan closed her eyes for a second. She took a deep breath, smelling the expensive leather and the faint scent of Arthur's scotch. She had to forget the room. She had to forget the rich people judging her. She had to be the architect again. Her eyes snapped open. She began to type. It started slowly, a rhythmic tapping as she pulled up the command terminal. She didn't use the mouse. Mice were for tourists. She bridged the connection to an external proxy server she had set up years ago, a ghost server in Iceland that she used to route traffic. Route add, net 192.168.0 zero net mask 255.255.255.0 0.1 ping orbital main dot gate. She's pinging them, Vivian scoffed. My grandmother could do that. She's not pinging them, Arthur murmured, leaning in closer. Look at the packet size. She's flooding the handshake with fragmented packets. She's forcing their firewall to reassemble them, creating a lag. Morgan's fingers sped up. The screen became a blur of green text. She wasn't just knocking on the door, she was dismantling the hinges. Orbital Tech used a rolling key encryption, which changed the password every 60 seconds. It was considered unhackable. Morgan didn't try to guess the password. She attacked the clock. She targeted the Network Time Protocol, NTP, server that Orbital used to sync their keys. By sending a spoofed time signal, she tricked their server into thinking it was 5 minutes in the past. Time desynchronization, Arthur whispered, a look of pure awe crossing his face. She's freezing their encryption cycle. On the screen, a prompt appeared. Access granted. Morgan didn't stop. She navigated through the directory tree with the speed of someone walking through their own living room. CD Confidential, Projects, Sabotage, Grep, R, Apex. 2 minutes left, Arthur said. "I'm in," Morgan said, her voice flat. "I'm looking for evidence that they hacked you." She scanned the files. She opened emails between Orbital's CEO and their head of security. She projected them onto the main wall screen so Arthur and Vivian could see. The emails were dated from yesterday. From CEO, Orbital Tech. To Security Chief. Subject, Sentinel launch. Body, we are terrified of Caldwell's new launch. If Sentinel works, we are obsolete. We have no way to penetrate it. We need to pivot our strategy to hardware immediately. Morgan stopped typing. She spun the chair around. "They didn't hack you," Morgan said. "They were scared to death of you. They think Sentinel is bulletproof." The room went silent. The evidence was irrefutable. Orbital Tech had no plan to sabotage Apex Logic because they believed Apex Logic was untouchable. Arthur stared at the email on the screen. The tension in his shoulders released. "So," Arthur said, turning to Vivian, "if Orbital didn't do it, and this girl just proved she can hack a Fortune 500 company in under 3 minutes, why would she use a clumsy deadlock error to crash my presentation?" Vivian's face had lost its smugness. She looked pale. She could have faked those emails. She's manipulating the data. "I'm viewing it directly from their server, Vivian," Arthur said coldly. "Unless she managed to rewrite their entire email archive in 2 minutes, this is real." Arthur looked at Morgan. The suspicion in his eyes was gone, replaced by something intense. Respect. "You really are the architect," he said. Morgan looked down at her hands. "I was. I'm just Morgan now." Arthur turned to the security guards who were still waiting outside the door. He opened it. "Escort Ms. Cross out of the building," Arthur said. Vivian's jaw dropped. "You're kicking me out? I own 15% of this company, Arthur." "And you just tried to have my new lead security consultant arrested without cause," Arthur lied smoothly. "Go home, Vivian. We'll discuss your board seat in the morning." Vivian glared at Morgan with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're making a mistake, Arthur. You're letting a wolf into the henhouse. Don't say I didn't warn you." She spun on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. Arthur closed the door and locked it. He turned back to Morgan. "You passed," he said. Morgan let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She slumped in the chair. "So, you're not calling the FBI?" "No," Arthur said. He walked over to the minibar and poured a glass of water, handing it to her. "I'm offering you a job. For real this time. Apex Logic is under attack, Morgan. If it wasn't Orbital, then someone else is trying to destroy me. Someone on the inside." Morgan took the water. Her hands were shaking. "You want me to find a mole?" "I want you to be my personal firewall," Arthur said. "You live here, in the guest suite. You work directly with me. Nobody knows your real identity. To the world, you're just a consultant." "And the pay?" Morgan asked, thinking of the eviction notice on her apartment door. Arthur wrote a number on a napkin and slid it across the desk. Morgan looked at it. It was more money than she would make in 10 years of waiting tables. "Deal," she whispered. 3 weeks had passed since the disaster at the Grand Meridian. The transition was jarring. Morgan went from scrubbing grease off plates to sitting in a glass-walled office on the 40th floor of the Apex Tower. Arthur had kept his word. He bought her a new wardrobe, sleek, professional blazers, and trousers that made her look like a young executive, not a waitress. He gave her a secure laptop and access to the source code of Sentinel. For the first time in her life, Morgan felt valued. She wasn't invisible. She spent her days rewriting the sloppy code the engineering team had left behind. She optimized the kernel, patched the security holes, and streamlined the data flow. She worked late, often until midnight. And Arthur was always there. He would bring her coffee. He would sit on the edge of her desk and ask her to explain her code. He listened to her. They developed a rhythm, a shorthand. "You're missing a bracket on line 50, she would say without looking up. "You're bossy for an employee," he would tease, fixing the line. "I'm not bossy, I'm right," she would smile. It was dangerous. She was falling for him. A billionaire genius who treated her like an equal. It was a fairy tale, but fairy tales have villains. Brian, the CTO, hated her. He hated that a waitress had fixed his mistake. He hated that Arthur spent all his time in her office. And Vivian Cross. Vivian hadn't disappeared. She was still on the board, watching from the shadows, waiting for a slip-up. One Tuesday night, a storm was battering the city. The office was empty, except for the cleaning crew and the security guards. Morgan was deep in the server logs. She had found something disturbing. A ghost protocol. It was a subroutine buried deep in the financial transaction layer of the Sentinel system. It wasn't designed to protect data. It was designed to siphon it. Every time a transaction was verified by Sentinel, a fraction of a cent was being diverted to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was the classic salami-slicing attack, but on a massive scale. With the volume of data Sentinel handled, this script was stealing millions of dollars a week. "Who put you there?" Morgan whispered to the screen. She traced the creation date. It was added 3 months ago. The author signature was masked, encrypted with a key she didn't recognize. She had to kill it. If this code went live to the public, Apex Logic would be sued into oblivion for theft. Morgan cracked her knuckles. She began to write a counterscript to isolate the ghost protocol and trace the IP address of the owner. Initiate bot and trace TOS. Target ghost protocol. Isolate. Node. Suddenly, her screen flickered. A chat window popped up. User. Admin. Message. "You shouldn't be looking there, Morgan." Morgan froze. Someone was watching her. Inside the system. Before she could type a reply, her screen turned red. The file she was examining, the ghost protocol, suddenly executed. But it didn't siphon money. It began to upload the entire Sentinel source code to an external server. "Upload in progress. 10%. 20%. "No," Morgan shouted. She tried to cancel the command. "Abort. Kill process. Access denied. No, no, no!" Her fingers flew across the keys. She tried to sever the connection physically, reaching for the Ethernet cable, but the upload was happening via the internal satellite link. The door to her office slammed open. Arthur stood there. He was soaking wet, having just come in from the rain. But the look on his face wasn't friendly. It was thunderous. Behind him stood Vivian Cross and 2 police officers. "There she is!" Vivian shrieked, pointing a finger at Morgan. "I told you, Arthur! I told you she was stealing it!" Arthur looked at the giant monitor on the wall. It clearly showed the Sentinel source code being uploaded to an external IP address, and at the bottom of the screen, the command line showed the user who initiated it. "User, Architect Arthur, listen to me," Morgan pleaded, standing up, her hands raised. "It's a setup. Someone remote triggered it. I found a skimming script and I was trying to stop it." Arthur walked into the room. He looked at the screen. He looked at the code. "That's your signature, Morgan," Arthur said, his voice broken. "The architect. That's your tag." "It was planted," Morgan cried. "Vivian, she knows my handle. She must have planted it." Vivian stepped forward, a look of mock sympathy on her face. "Arthur, I received an alert 10 minutes ago that large data packets were leaving the building. I called the police immediately. I knew you were too close to her to see the truth. She's selling us out to the Chinese market. She's been planning this since the night of the gala." Arthur looked at Morgan. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust the girl who shared coffee with him at 2 a.m. But the evidence was staring him in the face. The most valuable code in the world was being stolen, and her terminal was doing it. "Stop the upload," Arthur said quietly. "I can't," Morgan said, tears welling in her eyes. "They locked me out. Arthur, you have to believe me. Check the logs. Check the creation date of the Ghost Protocol." Arthur moved to the keyboard. He pushed Morgan aside roughly. He typed in his master override. Override. Rejected. "She changed the admin passwords, Arthur," Vivian said softly. "She locked you out of your own company." Arthur stared at the screen. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. He had opened his home to her. He had opened his life to her. He turned to the police officers. "Get her out of here," Arthur said. His voice was dead. "Arthur, please!" Morgan screamed as the officers grabbed her arms. "It's a frame-up. Check the Cayman accounts. Vivian is the one stealing the money." "That is enough," Vivian shouted. "Get this criminal out of my building." The officers dragged Morgan toward the door. She dug her heels into the carpet. "Arthur, look at the header! Look at the header!" she screamed. Arthur didn't look. He turned his back to her. Staring out the rain-streaked window, the door slammed shut. Morgan's screams were cut off. Vivian sighed, walking over to the desk. "I'm so sorry, Arthur. I know you liked her. But these people, they are predators. She played you." Arthur didn't answer. He watched the reflection of the city lights in the glass. "Cancel the upload, Vivian," Arthur said without turning around. I don't know if I can," Vivian stammered. "She locked it." "You have the other key," Arthur said. There was a silence. A long, heavy silence. Vivian stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." Arthur turned around slowly. His eyes were cold, harder than they had been on the night of the crash. "The system requires 2 admin keys to change the master password," Arthur said. "Mine, and the board chairman's. You're the chairman, Vivian." Vivian's smile faltered. "She must have hacked my account, too." "Maybe," Arthur said. He walked over to the desk where Morgan had been sitting just moments ago. The screen now said, "Upload complete." "Or maybe," Arthur said, picking up a small silver flash drive that Morgan had left plugged into the side of the laptop, a drive so small the police hadn't noticed it. "Maybe she left me a breadcrumb." He looked at Vivian. "Get out of my office." "Arthur." "I said get out!" he roared, throwing a glass paperweight against the wall. It shattered, sending shards flying. Vivian flinched. She adjusted her jacket, regaining her composure. "You're emotional. We'll talk when you've accepted reality." "The girl is gone, Arthur. And Sentinel is compromised. We need to focus on damage control." She left. Arthur stood alone in the silence. He looked at the silver flash drive in his hand. Morgan had shouted, "Look at the header," right before they took her. He plugged the drive into his own secure phone, bypassing the compromised network. He opened the files. It wasn't code. It was an audio recording. Recording date, 3 weeks ago. Location, penthouse suite. Arthur pressed play. "Voice 1, Vivian. He trusts you, Brian. Just plant the loop in the boot sequence. Make it look like a glitch. Voice 2, Brian. If I do this, I want double the shares, and I want Caldwell out. Voice 1, Vivian. Crash the stock, and I'll buy him out for pennies on the dollar. Then we sell Sentinel to the highest bidder." Arthur's hand shook. Morgan hadn't just been coding these past 3 weeks. She had been hunting. She had bugged the office. She had known all along. And he had just let the police drag her away. "Oh my God," Arthur whispered. He grabbed his coat and ran for the elevator. The holding cell at the 4th precinct was a cold, concrete box that smelled of bleach and despair. Morgan sat on the metal bench, her knees pulled up to her chest. She had been processed, fingerprinted, and stripped of her shoelaces. She was no longer Morgan the waitress, nor was she Morgan the high-powered analyst. She was inmate 904. "Bennett!" the guard barked, rattling the bars. "Your lawyer is here." Morgan frowned. She didn't have a lawyer. She couldn't afford a public defender, let alone a private attorney. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff. "I didn't call anyone," she whispered. "Well, someone called for you, and they made a hell of a lot of noise doing it." The guard unlocked the cell door and led her down the hallway to the interrogation room. Inside, sitting at the metal table, wasn't a lawyer in a cheap suit. It was Arthur Caldwell. He was still wearing his wet coat. He looked disheveled, frantic, and furious. Beside him stood a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, Arthur's personal attorney, Franklin Rhodes, known as the Shark in legal circles. "Morgan," Arthur said, standing up the moment she entered. He looked at the handcuffs on her wrists, and his jaw tightened. "Take those off her. Now." The guard hesitated. "Sir, she's a flight risk. She's a suspected cyber-terrorist. She is a whistleblower acting under the protection of the Whistleblower Protection Act," Franklin Rhodes cut in, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. "And you are currently detaining a key witness in a federal corporate espionage investigation without charging her. If those cuffs aren't off in 10 seconds, I will have this precinct sued for civil rights violations before your morning coffee gets cold." The guard looked at Franklin, then at the furious Billionaire. He unlocked the cuffs. Morgan rubbed her wrists, looking at Arthur. "You came." "I listened to the drive," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "I heard them, Morgan. Vivian and Brian. I know everything." Morgan felt the tears finally spill over. "I tried to tell you." "I know," Arthur said, stepping closer and grabbing her shoulders. "I was an idiot. I let my fear blind me. But I'm going to fix it." "How?" Morgan asked, wiping her eyes. "Vivian has the board. She has the police. She framed me with my own code." "We aren't fighting her with code this time," Arthur said darkly. "We're fighting her with the truth. But we have to move fast. Vivian has called an emergency board meeting for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Her agenda is simple. Fire me for incompetence and press full charges against you to bury the evidence." "She wants to sell Sentinel," Morgan said. "She's going to strip it for parts." "Exactly," Arthur said. "Rhodes has already filed an emergency injunction to get you released into my custody until the hearing. You're walking out of here tonight." "But what about tomorrow?" Morgan asked. "If she controls the narrative, we lose." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver flash drive, the one she had left him. "You recorded the audio," Arthur said. "But did you get the money trail?" Morgan shook her head. "I was trying to trace the Cayman accounts when she cut the connection. I need access to the mainframe to finish the trace. But I can't go back to the tower. Security will shoot me on sight." Arthur smiled, a dangerous, reckless smile. "Then we won't go to the tower," Arthur said. "Sentinel is a cloud-based system. We can access the mainframe from anywhere, provided we have a terminal with a hardline connection and an admin key." "Vivian revoked your admin key," Morgan reminded him. "She revoked my key," Arthur agreed, "but she forgot about the legacy system." Arthur leaned in close. "Do you remember where Apex Logic started? Before the skyscrapers? Before the billions?" Morgan nodded. "Your grandmother's garage in Palo Alto." "I kept the original server," Arthur said. "It's still active. It's hardwired into the core as a fail-safe. It has root access that overrides everything, even the board chairman." Morgan's eyes widened. "The God mode back door." Exactly, Arthur said. It's in a storage facility in Jersey. If we can get there by dawn, we can hijack the presentation. We can show the board exactly who the real thief is. Morgan stood up straighter. The fear was gone. The architect was back. Let's go, she said. 8 a.m. The Apex Tower boardroom. The boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel floating above the clouds. 12 board members sat around the massive oak table, sipping coffee and whispering. Vivian Cross sat at the head of the table. She looked radiant in a crimson power suit. Beside her sat Brian, the traitorous CTO, looking nervous and sweating through his shirt. Ladies and gentlemen, Vivian began, checking her watch. Thank you for convening on such short notice. As you know, we have suffered a catastrophic breach of trust. Arthur Caldwell's negligence allowed a known cybercriminal to infiltrate our most sensitive project. The board members nodded gravely. The damage is severe, Vivian continued, her voice filled with fake sorrow. But it is recoverable. We have a generous offer from Omnicorp to acquire the Sentinel technology. It will save our stock price. But to execute this deal, we must remove Arthur as CEO, effective immediately. I second the motion, a board member said. Wait, an elderly member said. Shouldn't Arthur be here to defend himself? Arthur is currently indisposed, Vivian said smoothly. He is likely dealing with the police regarding his accomplice. Let's vote, Brian said quickly. All in favor? Not so fast. The heavy double doors at the end of the room swung open. Arthur Caldwell walked in. He hadn't slept. He was wearing the same clothes from the day before, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like a man who had walked through hell. And walking right beside him, wearing a fresh Apex Logic hoodie, was Morgan. Vivian stood up, slamming her hand on the table. Security. How did she get in here? She is a fugitive. Actually, Arthur said, his voice calm and booming, she is the lead witness in a federal racketeering investigation. And you, Vivian, are the target. The room went silent. This is absurd, Vivian scoffed, though her eyes darted to the door. You're desperate, Arthur. You brought a criminal to a board meeting. I brought the person who saved this company twice, Arthur said. He pulled a remote from his pocket. Brian, you might want to sit down. This part is going to hurt. Arthur clicked the remote. The massive presentation screen behind Vivian, the same screen she planned to use to sell the company, flickered to life. But it didn't show a PowerPoint. It showed a live view of a bank transfer log. Source: Apex Logic. Sentinel transactions. Destination: Shell Corp 445. Grand Cayman account. Holder V. Cross. The numbers were scrolling in real time, millions of dollars. What is this? Vivian shrieked. This is fake. She forged it. It's not a forgery, Morgan spoke up, stepping forward. Her voice was steady. It's a live feed. We accessed the legacy server. We tracked the Ghost Protocol script. It didn't just steal data. It stole fractions of every transaction. And every single penny went to an account registered in your name, Vivian. Morgan tapped a key on a tablet she was holding. And here is the audio, she said. The speakers crackled. Vivian's voice filled the room, clear as a bell. Crash the stock, and I'll buy him out for pennies on the dollar. The board members gasped. The elderly member stood up, his face red. Vivian? Is this true? Vivian looked around the room. She saw the disgust on their faces. She saw Brian trembling. The walls were closing in. It was Brian! Vivian shouted, pointing at the CTO. He wrote the code. He forced me into it. You, what? Brian jumped up. You offered me $10 million. I have the emails, Vivian. I kept everything. Shut up, you idiot, Vivian screamed. Thank you, Brian, Arthur said coldly. That confession is exactly what the SEC needed. Arthur nodded to the door. 4 federal agents walked in, followed by the same detectives who had arrested Morgan the night before. "Vivian Cross, Brian Miller," the lead agent said, flashing his badge. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and grand larceny." Vivian didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply slumped into a chair, the color draining from her face. She looked at Arthur. "I made you," she whispered venomously. "No," Arthur said, looking at Morgan. "You just paid for the lights. We are the ones who keep them on." The agents handcuffed Vivian and Brian, marching them out of the boardroom past the stunned investors. When the doors closed, the silence was heavy. Arthur looked at the board members. "Now," Arthur said, buttoning his jacket, "if anyone else wants to sell my company, speak now." Nobody spoke. "Good," Arthur said. "Then I suggest we get back to work. We have a system to launch." 3 months later, the relaunch of the Sentinel was the biggest tech event of the decade. The Grand Meridian Ballroom was packed again, but this time the air wasn't filled with panic. It was electric with excitement. Arthur stood on the stage. He looked different, lighter, happier. "People ask me how we built the most secure system in history," Arthur told the crowd. "They ask if it was the hardware or the money." He looked toward the wings of the stage. Morgan stood there. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a stunning black evening gown, an earpiece in her ear and a tablet in her hand. She was the new chief technology officer of Apex Logic. Arthur smiled at her. "It wasn't the money," Arthur said into the microphone. "It was the fact that when the system failed, we didn't panic. We fixed the code." He gestured for her to come out. Morgan hesitated, then walked onto the stage. The applause was deafening. The world knew her story now. The waitress who saved the billionaire. The architect who used her powers for good. She stood next to Arthur. He turned off his microphone so only she could hear. "You realized you're famous now," Arthur said. "No more hiding in the shadows." Morgan looked out at the sea of flashing cameras. She looked at the man who had risked his empire to save her. "I don't mind the spotlight," she smiled, taking his hand. "As long as I'm not the one serving the drinks." Arthur squeezed her hand. "Phase 2 initiated." "Phase 2?" she asked. "Dinner," he said. "With me. No computers. No code." Morgan laughed. "That sounds like the hardest challenge yet." The screen behind them lit up with the Sentinel logo, shining bright gold. The system was perfect. And this time, nobody missed a bracket. What a roller coaster. From being humiliated as a waitress to running the biggest tech company in the world, Morgan proved that true genius can come from anywhere. It just goes to show, never underestimate someone because of their uniform. You never know who might be holding the keys to the kingdom. I hope you enjoyed this story of betrayal, justice, and redemption. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Question for you. If you were in Arthur's position, would you have trusted Morgan after finding out she was a wanted hacker? Or would you have played it safe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.